I had been out of work for months, living off my savings and getting by on odd jobs that barely kept the bills paid. Every day felt the same. Endless hours spent searching for jobs, sending out applications that went unanswered, and the creeping weight of uncertainty that hung over me. So, when I stumbled upon the ad in the paper, I was desperate enough to jump at it without giving it too much thought. Librarian's assistant wanted. Quiet, secluded location. Must be comfortable with night shifts. Apply in person. The words jumped out at me. Quiet, secluded, night shifts. Exactly what I needed. A job in a library seemed like the perfect escape from the relentless noise of the city. I imagined the musty scent of old books, the soft glow of desk lamps, the silence broken only by the occasional turning of a page. I had no idea that my new job would lead me into a world far stranger and darker than anything I could have imagined. I showed up at the library the next morning, the building sitting quietly at the edge of town, hidden behind towering trees and creeping ivy. The architecture was old, even ancient, with stone walls covered in moss, windows framed by curling ironwork, and a weathered sign reading simply, "The Blackwood Library." I hadn't heard of it before, but then again, I hadn't lived here long. Something about the place felt off, though. It seemed to exist on the edge of time, frozen in an era long past. Inside, the library was as grand as it was unsettling. The entrance hall was dimly lit, with towering shelves stacked high with books, old ones, new ones, leather-bound and fragile paperbacks. The air smelled of dust and something else I couldn't quite place, like a mix of old parchment and something heavier, thicker, almost unnatural. I was greeted by a tall woman, the librarian herself, who introduced herself as Ms. Blackwood. She had a peculiar air about her, something almost ethereal in the way she moved. Her dark hair framed a face that was sharp yet soft, with piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through me. There was a quiet authority in her presence, something that made me feel like I was standing in the presence of someone who had seen more than I could comprehend. "I'm glad you came," she said, her voice smooth yet oddly distant. "The position is straightforward. I'll need you to assist with organizing the stacks, cataloging books, and maintaining the collection. The work is simple, but there's one rule you'll need to remember." I nodded, already feeling the weight of her gaze. "What's that?" Her lips curled into a faint smile, but her eyes remained focused, unblinking. "The books do not leave the shelf at night. They are not to be moved or disturbed once the sun sets. You'll notice the library gets a bit different after dark." I blinked, unsure of how to respond. The words hung in the air for a moment, thick with something I couldn't name. "Different?" I asked, trying to mask my confusion. Ms. Blackwood nodded slightly. "You'll see for yourself. Just follow the rules and you'll be fine. Don't try to disturb the books when the evening comes. We keep the library's balance." Her words left an eerie chill in my chest, but I dismissed them as the ramblings of someone who had spent too many years alone in the dark halls of this place. Surely, she was just an eccentric librarian with an overactive imagination. I could handle a weird rule. After all, it was just a job, right? Miss Blackwood handed me a set of keys, their weight heavy in my palm. "This is for the main door, the back room, and the cellar. You'll be working the night shifts mostly. The day staff is light, but at night, we need someone to manage the shelves. The library operates 24 hours. The thought of working through the night seemed like a small price to pay for the quiet solitude the library promised. I nodded, trying to hide the unease that had started to settle in my stomach. "Understood. I'm ready." She gave me a brief but approving glance, and then led me down the hall, past row after row of shelves. The library was vast, its floors creaking underfoot as we walked. The further we went, the deeper the smell of old paper and dust seemed to settle into my lungs, the air thicker, as if something in the library was absorbing every breath I took. Miss Blackwood stopped in front of a wooden door, old and worn, but still sturdy. "This is your office for the night. You'll find everything you need here. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask." I stood there for a moment, listening to the whispers that seemed to come from the shelves, the soft rustling of books as if they were calling to me. But when I turned around, I saw only the quiet halls, the dim lighting, and the seemingly empty space. The unease I had dismissed earlier was now palpable. Something was off about this place, but I didn't have time to figure it out just yet. The job itself seemed simple. Take care of the books, follow the rules, and collect the paycheck. I could do that. As I settled into my office that first night, the library grew darker. The overhead lights flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the room. The stillness was so complete that I could hear my heart beat, the steady rhythm that echoed in my ears. Outside, the wind howled against the old windows, but inside it was silent, except for the occasional creaking of wood and the faint shuffling of pages. I glanced at the clock. Midnight. The library felt different now, as if it had come alive in a way I hadn't expected. But I dismissed the growing tension in my chest, reminding myself that it was probably just the strange atmosphere. Books were just books after all, right? But then I heard it. A soft whispering coming from the shelves. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the rustle of pages in the breeze. The books were talking. The whispering from the shelves grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't just a soft rustle in the air, like wind slipping between the cracks of an old building. No, this was different. This was intentional, like 1,000 voices weaving together in low murmurs, just out of reach. I stood frozen, my hand on the office desk, as the quiet of the library pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. I looked around, the dim light casting long shadows on the shelves, the books sitting silently, waiting. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere, from within the books themselves, from the walls, the air. It was as if the entire library had come alive, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. Why hadn't I noticed it earlier? I shook my head, trying to clear the confusion. "It's just the wind," I whispered to myself. "The building is old. It creaks. I'm just imagining things." But even as I spoke the words, I knew they didn't make sense. This was different. There was something more to it. I grabbed my flashlight, the beam of light shaking as I moved it over the rows of books. The whispering seemed to follow me, creeping from one shelf to the next. My pulse quickened as I turned the corner, my eyes scanning the room. There, in the distance, a book had fallen off the shelf and lay open on the floor. I hadn't heard it hit the ground, but there it was, pages fluttering in the dim light, as though it were alive. I bent down, cautiously, my hand reaching for the book. The moment my fingers brushed the cover, a shiver ran up my spine like an electric shock. The pages fluttered again, as if responding to my touch. It was strange. The book felt warm, pulsing, as though it had its own life force. But the title was unfamiliar. There was no author, no recognizable name, just symbols, strange and intricate, dancing across the cover. Before I could examine it further, I heard the faintest sound, a creak followed by a soft whisper, unmistakably close to my ear. I spun around, but there was nothing. The shelves stood still. The library was as quiet as it had been before, but now the air felt thick, like it was holding its breath. I stepped back, holding the book at arm's length. What was happening? This wasn't just an ordinary library. There was something wrong, something deeply unsettling about it all. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence, the hands inching toward 1 a.m. The air felt colder now, almost icy, despite the warmth of the fireplace in the corner. I glanced at the book in my hands again, and the pages seemed to shift. Not in a way they should. No, this was something else. It was as if the book was inviting me, pulling me into its story. I snapped it shut, my heartbeat racing in my chest. I had to stop. I couldn't afford to get caught up in something irrational. I placed the book back on the shelf and turned to leave, but then I heard it again. The faint sound of pages turning, coming from the same spot where I'd just placed the book. I froze, my feet rooted to the floor. The sound grew louder, more insistent, as if the book was trying to communicate with me, calling me back. It was too much. My instinct screamed at me to leave the library, to lock the door and walk away from whatever this was. But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to walk away. The pull was too strong. I turned slowly, my hands trembling as I reached for the book once more. This time, I was determined to find out what it was about, what was so special about it. As I opened it again, the whispers grew louder, clearer, as if the book itself was speaking to me in a language I had never heard, but somehow understood. The pages flipped on their own, faster and faster, until they landed on a specific page, one filled with symbols and writing that seemed to crawl across the paper. As my eyes followed the lines, the words began to shift, changing in ways that didn't seem natural. I could feel the library closing in around me, the walls pressing closer, and the whispers growing into a low, guttural hum that rattled in my bones. A chill swept through the room, and the air grew thicker, almost tangible, as if it had substance. The whispers became clearer, now unmistakably speaking in a language I could understand, but the words made my blood run cold. You have unlocked it. I couldn't breathe. My fingers went numb as I released the book, stumbling backward. The room seemed to warp around me, the shelves stretching and shifting in a way that shouldn't have been possible. The light flickered and dimmed, and the book on the shelf, the book that had been untouched for so long, seemed to hum, vibrating with some unseen force. The whispering grew louder, almost deafening now. The ground beneath me began to shake as if the library itself were alive, responding to whatever dark energy had been awakened. I grabbed onto a shelf to steady myself, but the books were moving. They shifted, not on their own, but as if they had minds of their own, creeping forward, closer, toward the edges of the shelves. I looked up, and for the first time I noticed something that should have been impossible. The books weren't just on the shelves anymore. They were floating, gently hovering in midair, their pages flipping of their own accord, as if searching for something, searching for me. Panic surged through me. I had to leave, but the door wouldn't open. The room seemed to stretch farther, pulling me deeper into the madness. The walls of the library were closing in. I was trapped. I turned toward the back room, hoping I could find the exit. But as I stepped into the hallway, I realized with a sickening sense of horror that the library wasn't just a building anymore. It was a living entity, and I had just awakened it. The library had become something entirely different. I could feel it, deep in my bones. This place was alive, and I had triggered something within it. The oppressive weight of the air pressed down on me, thick and suffocating, as though the walls themselves were breathing. The books, once neatly arranged, were no longer simply passive objects. They moved slowly, deliberately, as though guided by an unseen force. My heart raced in my chest, a loud, constant drumbeat of fear and confusion. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat as I watched the shelves shift. The books trembled, some sliding a fraction of an inch to the left or right, others leaping from their spots entirely, floating just inches above the shelves. The strange hum filled the air again, this time louder, more intense, as if the entire library was in motion. I stepped away from the hallway, feeling the wooden floorboards beneath me groan with every movement. I couldn't understand it. Why was this happening? The library had always seemed like a quiet, mundane place, an institution of knowledge. How could it turn into this? Into something far more dangerous? Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the space, and I turned toward the sound. The nearest shelf had collapsed under the weight of the books, sending the volumes tumbling to the floor in a mess of paper and dust. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. What was disturbing was how the books began to move. They weren't just scattered haphazardly. No, they were arranging themselves, sorting into neat stacks, their pages fluttering as if they were searching for something, some order, some purpose. I backed away, trying to stay calm. The library's silence had been replaced by the unmistakable sound of the book's movement, the soft rustle of pages, the creak of wood, the whispering of voices that seemed to emanate from the books themselves. "You shouldn't have opened it." The voice came from somewhere behind me, but it wasn't human. It was deep, resonant, like the voice of the library itself. I spun around, but there was no one there, just the moving books, shifting and whispering as if trying to communicate. My heart thudded in my chest and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. "What is this?" I whispered to myself, barely able to comprehend what I was seeing. The books were alive, conscious. But why? I took a tentative step forward, my eyes scanning the shelves, trying to understand. As I neared a particularly large, ornate bookshelf in the corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A book that wasn't just moving, it was floating. It hovered in midair, pages fluttering, as if it was waiting for me. I stepped closer, my feet reluctant to move, but something about it drew me in, a compulsion that I couldn't explain. The book opened, its pages flipping rapidly, as though it had a mind of its own. Words appeared on the pages, words that shifted and changed as I read them. I couldn't stop myself from reading, the dark power of the library pulling me in. The pages were filled with ancient symbols, old languages, words that I didn't recognize but that somehow felt familiar. It was as if the book was speaking to me in a language I had forgotten. The whispers grew louder, and I could hear them more clearly now, emanating from the books around me. "Join us. Become one of us," the books seemed to say. The words echoed in my head, a hypnotic chant that made my vision blur. The world around me seemed to fade, and the library took on a life of its own. The shelves seemed to pulse, breathing in rhythm with my heart. The books had power, dark power, and they wanted me to be part of it. I snapped out of the trance-like state, shaking my head, trying to clear the images of the book's words from my mind. But the whispers wouldn't stop. They were everywhere, filling the air around me, crawling into my thoughts. I backed away from the floating book, but it wasn't just the one book anymore. All around me, the books began to shift again. Some slid off their shelves, others hovered in the air, their pages opening and closing as though they were looking for something. Or someone. I glanced toward the back of the library, toward the mysterious door that led to the deeper sections of the building. The librarian had warned me about these books. She had told me they would come alive at night, but I hadn't taken her seriously. Now it was too late. The whispering intensified, and I could feel my pulse racing as the books drew closer. I turned on my heel, running toward the back of the library, desperate to find answers, to escape from the madness that had gripped the space. But it was like the library itself was alive, keeping me trapped. As I neared the door, I noticed that the shelves near the entrance had started to move, sliding out of place as if they were locking me in. The shelves were growing taller, their books more agitated, their pages flapping as if they were alive and aware. "You cannot leave." The voice came again, clear and firm, sending a chill through my spine. The books were alive, and they had claimed me. I had opened the door to something ancient, something far beyond the world I knew. The books weren't just books, they were gateways, and I had unlocked one. There was no turning back now. I was trapped in the library, and the books weren't finished with me yet. I felt the weight of the library pressing down on me. The whispers seemed to follow me as I fled deeper into the maze of shelves, but no matter where I turned, I couldn't escape the overwhelming sense that I was trapped. The books seemed to be everywhere, their presence suffocating, their pages fluttering as if they were breathing. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the more I ran, the more alive the library became. I stumbled into a back hallway, deeper within the bowels of the library. The shelves here were stacked higher, the air thicker, the light dimmer. The smell of old paper was stronger, mingling with something else, something musty, like decay. It was as if the library itself was aging, shifting between centuries, its very walls and books infused with dark history. Suddenly, I stopped. In front of me, I saw a door, a heavy wooden door, different from all the others I had passed. It was old, the wood cracked and worn, the surface marred by time. A soft glow emanated from beneath the door, and I could feel a strange pull, urging me to open it. My fingers hovered over the brass handle, trembling. Part of me wanted to leave, to run, to escape this nightmare. But another part of me, the part that had been drawn here, the part that had opened the book, couldn't resist the pull. I had to know what was behind this door. I had to understand what had happened to this place, to the books that were alive, to the curse that seemed to bind everything together. I pushed the door open. Inside, the room was unlike any other I had seen in the library. The walls were lined with ancient tomes, far older than the others, their spines cracked and fading. But the air in here was different, thick with magic, with power. It wasn't just a room filled with books, it was alive, pulsating with energy. The books on the shelves were arranged in strange patterns, their bindings decorated with symbols I couldn't recognize, but they seemed familiar, as if I'd seen them before, in a dream or in the pages of the book I had opened earlier. In the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal. On it rested a book unlike any other, its cover black as night, its pages worn and tattered, but it gave off an energy so intense that I could feel it vibrating in my bones. This was the book. This was the source of the power in the library. This was the one that had bound all the other books to this place, the key to the entire mystery. I reached out for it, my fingers trembling as I touched the cover. The moment my hand made contact, the library seemed to shift. The shelves creaked, and the whispers from the books grew louder, more insistent. I could hear the voices calling to me now, the words clear and urgent. you have opened it." The book seemed to respond to my touch, its pages flipping wildly, words appearing and disappearing, the text shifting and changing before my eyes. The words were ancient, written in a language I couldn't comprehend, yet somehow I could understand them. The power in the book was overwhelming, a flood of knowledge, of dark secrets filling my mind. The library was created to trap knowledge. The voice echoed in my mind, to keep it from the outside world. The books were never meant to leave. They hold power, secrets of the past, of what should have been forgotten. I stepped back, my heart pounding. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, from the very books themselves, from the walls, from the library. I realized then that the library wasn't just a place to house books. It was a prison, a sanctuary for ancient knowledge that had been locked away for a reason. The books weren't just records of history. They were alive, infused with the essence of the past, of forbidden knowledge. The book on the pedestal continued to speak to me, its words like a gentle hum in my head. The library is cursed. The ritual that created it has bound the knowledge to the land, to the books, to the very pages. Each book is a fragment of the past, of those who sought to understand the unseen, those who lost themselves in their search for knowledge. I stepped closer to the pedestal, feeling the weight of the book's power bearing down on me. The air around me felt heavier now, the walls closing in as if the library were responding to my presence, to the knowledge I was unlocking. The library had never been meant to be opened. It had been built as a place to trap knowledge, to contain it, and anyone who dared to uncover the secrets would be consumed by them. "The books you have read," the voice continued, "are only the beginning. They hold pieces of the past, fragments of souls that were lost to the library's power. The library has claimed them, just as it will claim you." A shiver ran down my spine. The truth was clear now. The library wasn't just a collection of books. It was a living entity, a place where the spirits of those who had come before me were trapped in the pages, bound to the books. And I was no different. I had been chosen, pulled into this world of knowledge and darkness. I tried to pull away from the pedestal, but the books around me seemed to grow, their presence suffocating, pressing in on me. The walls seemed to stretch outward, the shelves closing in, the books whispering in a language I couldn't understand but felt deep in my bones. The air was thick with the weight of knowledge, and I could feel myself being drawn in, becoming part of the very library I had stepped into. There was no escape now. The curse had taken hold. The walls of the library seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like the lungs of some ancient, slumbering creature. Every whisper from the book seemed to reverberate within me, crawling beneath my skin, sinking into my very bones. The deeper I ventured into this library, the more I felt the weight of its power, its ability to ensnare, to consume anyone who dared to unlock its secrets. I backed away from the pedestal, feeling the oppressive atmosphere closing in around me. I had to get out. My mind raced, but my body felt sluggish, as if the library itself had drained all of my energy. The air felt thicker with every passing second, almost suffocating. The books, once neatly arranged on their shelves, now seemed to move with a mind of their own, their pages rustling as if calling to me, beckoning me closer. As I turned to leave, the hallway I had come through was no longer the same. The walls shifted, closing in, warping the once familiar path into a maze. The doors, which I had passed only moments ago, were gone, replaced by rows of darkened shelves, their books watching me, waiting for my next move. I tried to open the door, but the handle refused to budge. I tugged again and again, but it felt as if the library had sealed me in, locking me away. It was as though the building itself was alive, and it didn't want me to leave. "You cannot escape." The voice came again, its words a low growl that sent a chill down my spine. I spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but the library was still, too still. The shadows stretched unnaturally, the books trembling as though they were alive, responding to the call. I turned and began running again, desperate for any exit, but the shelves grew taller, the aisles longer. Every direction seemed to lead to a dead end. Another stack of books, another whispering voice. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, the world around me warping, the boundaries between the library and something else, something darker, blurring. The whispers turned into choking gasps, as if the books themselves were suffocating. The weight of their presence pressed harder on my chest with every step I took. I couldn't think clearly. The air felt thicker, heavier, and I knew that the library was closing in on me. I turned a corner, and there, at the far end of the aisle, stood the librarian, Ms. Blackwood. She wasn't looking at me, but instead her back was to me, as though she had been standing there the entire time, watching me struggle, waiting for me to come to her. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my throat tightened. The words wouldn't come. I was too afraid to approach her, yet something about her stillness, called to me. It was as though she was waiting, watching me as if she knew exactly what I had done to awaken the power of the library. "It's too late now." Her voice was calm, almost soothing, but the words hit me like a cold slap. "You opened it. The knowledge is no longer just a tool. It's part of you now. The library won't let you go." I stumbled back, my mind racing. "What are you talking about?" Ms. Blackwood finally turned to face me. Her face was unchanged, her expression calm, but her eyes, those cold, piercing eyes, looked through me, as if seeing through my very soul. "The library was never meant to be opened," she explained softly. "It was created to trap knowledge that is too dangerous to be free. The books have always been alive, and those who enter seeking answers become part of them. The books absorb them, and the library grows stronger. You have become one of them now." I recoiled from her words. This couldn't be happening. I had only wanted a job, a place to escape. But now I realized that it was never about finding peace. The library had been waiting for someone like me, someone who would unlock its power. "I don't want to be part of it," I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. "Please, I need to leave." Miss Blackwood's lips curled into a faint, almost pitying smile. "You can't leave. You're already inside." She stepped aside, revealing the rows of ancient books that seemed to move and whisper with malignant intent. The air in front of me shimmered, and I realized that the books themselves had shifted, blocking my way to the door. The library had become alive, breathing with power, and there was no escape from its grasp. I backed away from the books, my feet stumbling over the uneven floor. The voices grew louder now, a cacophony of whispers, urging me to come closer. I tried to run again, but the aisles seemed endless. The walls stretched and the shadows twisted, trapping me in this place. The knowledge, the power, was inescapable. I turned back toward Ms. Blackwood, but she was gone. The library was all that remained, its presence swallowing me whole. The shelves towered over me, the books now alive, watching me, waiting for me to give in to the darkness they held within. I was trapped. The library had claimed me, just as it had claimed all those before me. I was now part of its endless cycle, a prisoner within its walls, bound to its knowledge, its power. There was no escape. I had become part of the library. I could feel the library's pulse under my feet, its energy thrumming through the floorboards and walls, coursing through my veins. It was alive in a way I had never understood, and it was now a part of me. There was no escaping it, no turning back. Every inch of the library felt like a tightening grip, drawing me deeper into its web of dark knowledge. The whispers, the voices, called to me from every corner, every shelf, every book. They spoke of things I couldn't understand, but I could feel them, alive, pressing against my thoughts. The room around me seemed to stretch and warp, the shelves twisting like living creatures, growing taller and more imposing with every passing moment. The books, their pages flipping rapidly, seemed to move independently, as if they had a will of their own, as if they were alive, and they had been waiting for me. I turned in a circle, feeling my head spin, my mind racing. I had to understand. Why was this happening? How had I become trapped in this cursed place? The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. There was no escape. The library wasn't just a building, it was a prison, a place where those who sought knowledge were forever bound to the pages of its books. It wasn't just that the books were alive. It was that they fed on those who wandered too deep into their secrets, drawing their souls into the darkness they contained. But as I looked around, my gaze fixed on the pedestal in the center of the room, where the ancient book, the source of the library's power, had once rested. It was gone, vanished, leaving nothing but the empty pedestal and a sense of loss in its wake. The book that had started it all, the one that had drawn me in, had been taken. But by whom? The answer came to me like a chilling whisper. The librarian, Miss Blackwood. She hadn't just been a caretaker of the books. She was part of this, part of the ancient ritual that had bound the books to the land, part of the dark knowledge that had taken root here. She had been the keeper, the guardian of the knowledge within these pages, and I had been nothing more than a pawn, brought here to unlock the power that lay hidden within the library's walls. My body shook with the realization. I had been chosen, just like all the others before me. Those who sought to learn had become trapped, their souls bound to the books, their knowledge consumed and kept forever in the dark recesses of the library. The library didn't just house knowledge, it devoured it. I walked toward the pedestal, my feet heavy with the weight of everything I had discovered. I could feel the pull, the compulsion to understand, to find the answers to the questions that had been plaguing me. But the closer I got to the pedestal, the more I felt the darkness within me, the whispering, the voices, the beckoning calls. It all grew louder. I stood in front of the pedestal and looked at the place where the book had been. My fingers ached to touch the empty space, to feel its power again. But then a voice echoed in my mind, as if the library itself was speaking directly to me. You cannot undo what has been done. The words were final, unwavering. There was no escape. There was no undoing what had already been set in motion. The library had claimed me, just as it had claimed those before me, and those who would come after. I was now part of the cycle, bound to the books and to the knowledge they held. My fate had been sealed the moment I had opened the forbidden tome, the book that had called to me, that had pulled me into its world. The air around me grew heavier, and I could feel the weight of the library pressing on me. The books began to rustle again, their pages fluttering like the sound of 1,000 wings. I could feel the knowledge within them, the ancient secrets, the dark power they held, all calling to me, urging me to accept my fate. Join us. Become one of us. I closed my eyes, feeling the pull, feeling the knowledge surging through me. It was too much. The library's power, its hold, was unbearable. The whispers grew louder, their words clearer, more insistent. I was part of the library now, and there was no way out. But then, something inside me broke. A small spark of resistance flared deep within my chest. This wasn't who I was. This wasn't the life I had wanted. I'd been drawn here by curiosity, by the desire to understand. But now I saw the truth. The library didn't just give knowledge, it consumed those who sought it. And now I was one of them, trapped in a world of endless whispers, endless knowledge, endless darkness. I fought against the pull, feeling my mind strain against the weight of the library's influence. I had to escape. I had to break free from its hold. But the more I resisted, the stronger the pull became. The shelves around me seemed to close in, the books pressing against me, their pages reaching out, as if they were trying to drag me deeper into the library. The air grew thick with the presence of the library, its power, its essence, and I realized the horrible truth. There was no escaping this place. The library had consumed me, and I had become a part of it. My soul, my knowledge, would be bound to these books forever. I had unlocked the secret, and now there was no way to undo what had been done. As I closed my eyes, I felt the last remnants of myself slip away, consumed by the library, swallowed by its endless hunger. And as the darkness took me, I could hear the faint whispers of the books, my books, calling me to join them. Welcome home.